The man who is tempted in every way is called Lin Dog. On the surface he is a dung picker. In reality, he is the greatest master of the jungle, the third young master of the divine sword villa. Because of his martial arts skills, he was invincible in the jungle, so the world called him the god of swords. But the tree was too big to attract the wind. Many people have challenged him for this title, but they were all defeated. But soon, he grew tired of the fighting and the killing. But his father continued to use him to eradicate evil spirits, to strengthen his own power. On this day, they came to the home of a swordsman who had left the world, and forced him to fight. After his defeat, they even cut his family down to size. This massacre, it was the last straw that broke the camel's back. Lin Dog was no longer willing to help the enemy, so he faked his own death and escaped. He came to the town of bitterness to get drunk in anonymity, hoping to forget that unpleasant past. But he soon spent all the money he had. He even owed a lot of money. The pimp led a search of his body to make sure he didn't have a penny on him. So he was told to stay at the moon house and work hard to pay back the money. He was given a new name, Aji, and so he became the lowest of the low in the house. Even his little sisters would bully him a bit, and he was really obedient. And so, with everyone laughing at him, Aoshi became a useless Aoshi. But he was happy to accept whatever he was called, because he thought that he would be safe from the blood and gore of the jungle, to live as an ordinary man. But that life was soon shattered. That night, when Xiaoli was serving a drunken man, she accidentally scattered the customer's money bag on the floor. Looking at the gold pearls, she rushed to pick them up. When she looks up, she finds Aoshi right across the street. But Aoshi is a sword god after all. He didn't move at all. He bounced back again. Seeing this, Xiaoli called him a fool for not even wanting the money. The price was soon to come. Ray was beaten up and thrown overboard that night. He watched as Guitar followed his advice. Then he offered a deal. As long as he could get himself out of Xiaoya house, you can play any way you want. But Aguilar cherishes the life he has now. He decisively refused. Looking at his attitude, Xiaoli can't help but say he's no good. He won't pick up the gold pearls. He doesn't dare to sleep with women. No wonder everyone called him useless Ajay. The next day Xiaoli met two shameless freeloaders. They didn't even pay for the meat they ate. Xiaoli went to stop them but was pushed to the ground. Seeing this scene, Ji stood up for herself. He didn't move even though the knife was stabbed into his body. The scoundrel had never seen such a scene before. He had to pay and flee. There's no such thing as a free lunch, and there's no such thing as a free knife. Aoshi's knife fight succeeds in getting Ray to fall. Just as the two were making love in the woodshed, when they were about to make love, the pimp bursts in, fearing that his identity would be exposed. Ji had to drag himself away, but he didn't know where to go, so he kneels before the bodhisattva and kowtows. A man passing by took pity on him, so he took him back to his place. From then on, Aoshi began to work hard at picking dung. Although his life was poor, but it was the kind of peaceful life he had always dreamed of. One night, he suddenly saw Ray walk into the house, trembling. So this was his home. Look at the wounds on his back. Clearly he had been subjected to inhumane torture again. The next day at the dinner table, the man introduced Lori with great gusto. He said she was his proud sister, a maid for a rich family. Aji looked at him and pretended not to know him. He didn't reveal it. After the meal, Xiaoli finds Ji and confesses her love. He said that he had saved enough money to buy his life. In a few days he would buy a piece of land. He said he would buy a piece of land and farm with his family. Looking at the kind and simple Xiaoli, Aoshi's heart rippled. But the big boss wouldn't let the money tree go so easily. He sends a killer to arrest her. Watching the gangsters rob her on the street, Aoshi couldn't resist and went straight for her. The assassin saw the chaos. And stepped forward with unrecognizable steps. But when he saw what she looked like, he was almost scared out of his wits. He had faked his own death to save his life. How could he have met this man again? As he retreated, dazed and dumbfounded, a man who looked like Lubu, carrying a stone tablet on his back, he walked over. This man was the #1 killer in the world, Yen 13. He was just out for a robbery. How did he meet two of the best assassins in the world? The killer ran away from the scene, and Yen 13 didn't chase after them, because he just wanted to find a quiet place to bury himself. As the #1 swordsman in the jianghu, Yen 13 is a man who has gone mad for the way of the sword. He had no defeats in his life, but every time he was defeated, a man would take away his victories. That man was the third master, living in the shadow of the third young master. Yen 13 suffered greatly, so he decided to fight him. But when he arrived at the Divine Sword Villa, he was told that the third young master was dead. He was looking for his soulmate. Who can listen when the soulmate is gone? How lonely it is to be invincible. Besides, once the third master was dead, he can no longer prove his strength. He will always be second in the world. And so, hopeless at life, he chose to be a loser. He chose to end his life. But plans don't change as quickly as they should. At the pleading of the villagers, he killed the big boss, and so he became a hero in the spotlight. A feeling he'd never felt before as a killer. It gave him an instant boost of motivation. But teaching people to fish is better than teaching them to fish. To save the people from future harm, he decided to pass on his 13 swords to Aji. Looking at the bold Yen 13, Aji and his heroes are heroes. In order not to let him die with regret, Ji decided to learn the 13 swords of death from him. But little did he know that a new trouble was coming. This night, Ji is about to communicate with Xiao Li in depth. To test the depth of his kung fu skills, suddenly a sharp sword attack comes. It turns out that Big Boss's forces have come for revenge. The leader of the group is none other than Bamboo Leaf Green. This man is no ordinary person. He is the #1 killer of the Big Boss. So the third young master, he has an unmarried wife called Murong Chiodi. They had been childhood sweethearts since they were children. They had been in love since they were kids. They were thought to be a perfect couple. But one day, Ji heard that his father wanted to join forces with the Murong family to take over the martial arts world. So despite the fact that Chiodi was pregnant, he decided to run away from the marriage. And so the disgraced master Murong, he was killed on the spot. In order to secure the Murong family's position in the martial world, Chiodi had no choice but to remarry another man. But on the same day, Ji came to steal the marriage. As the saying goes, when you're young you don't know what a scumbag is like. But she mistook him for a treasure, and so Chiodi runs away from the marriage in spite of the 2 licking dogs. She ran away with the third young master, but he's not used to living in poverty in the countryside. And so they break up once again. The 2 of them broke up again, so he came to seek revenge under the guise of public service. Just as he attacked him with poison, he was about to assassinate him. Yen 13 arrives and manages to save him. On the other hand, Xiao Li, who should have run away, suddenly remembered that the hard money she earned from selling herself was still inside the house. She rushed back to the house, but she collides with Chiodi. As the saying goes, when lovers meet, they see each other in a different light. Looking at his delicate features, Chiodi was furious. She had her men push him into the fire. The next day, when Yen 13 brought the third young master, returned to the village again, Xiao Li's family was already in ruins. He himself had been burned beyond recognition. Looking at the village, which looked like a hell on earth, and hearing that the man behind the attack was going to kill the Sword of God Villa, I thought Ji was going to regain his strength. Instead, he was in a state of depression. This made Yen 13 furious. When he found out that the third young master was Ji, he had deliberately cheated on his corpse, but he was so bloodless. In the end, with the encouragement of Yen 13, he managed to regain his confidence as a man, and became the third young master. On the other hand, without the third young master, was beaten and defeated. In order to die with dignity, he even imprisoned himself in a secret room, and waited for his death. At the very moment of crisis, Yen 13 flew out. He stuck the stone door with his best sword. Then he summoned the third young master. Let him start playing the fool. Seeing that the goddess was a bit impressed, Bamboo Leaf Green panicked instantly. But the minion was no match for the third master. Within a few rounds, he was given the same treatment as the others. Bamboo Leaf Green had no choice but to fight himself. But his kung fu was weak. He still couldn't force the third master to use his sword. And seeing the third master knock out the crowd with just his scabbard, Chiodi couldn't help but see his eyes light up. He took the initiative to try his hand, and the third master took her hand in his. Just when she thought she could rekindle her love, he left her behind once more. And when Zhu Yeqing saw that they were not seeing eye to eye, she went to stop them, but Chiodi stabbed her in the back. Seeing that her love was hopeless, Bamboo Leaf Green simply destroyed what he could not have. He chose to die with her. It all came to an end. Ji is back on his feet. He's back to being the third young master, but he still has one more duel with Yen 13, although they were already like brothers. For Yen 13, the most humiliating end for a swordsman is to die in his bed, and so they faced off in the ultimate duel. As the third master had mastered the 13 deadly swords, and because of his illness, he could not reach the peak of his strength. Under the competition, he gradually fell behind. He was eventually stabbed in the chest with an arrow, but he didn't regret it, because this was the best ending. In the end, the third young master buried Yen 13 in the Bitter Sea town. He exchanged his own sword for his sword. In the first half of his life, people always thought of Yen 13 as him. In the second half of his life, he wanted to give him back this title. He will use the name of Yen 13 to fight for justice, to travel the jungle,